and welcome to AEW Unrestricted. We are the official podcast of All Elite Wrestling. It is me, Aubrey Edwards. It is my best friend, Will Washington. We are here. We talk to guests. We do lots of fun stuff. And just to remind everybody, we are sponsored in part by Upper Deck. And I think we've got a little cool digital promo card set. Will, why don't you tell us about it?
Yeah, we do. And you can claim your free 2025 AEW All-In digital promo card set from Upper Deck today. The set is only available until July 28th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. The link is in the show notes for this episode. All-In Texas digital promo card set has Timeless Tony Storm, Swerve Strickland, Willow Nightingale, John Moxley, Mercedes Moné, Kenny Omega. You want this set. Upper Deck is always the best at what they do. And again, check out that set. It's only available until July 28th at 12 p.m. And I've got my 2025 Upper Deck AEW cards. I got Excalibur.
Nice. I pulled a bunch, and it just reminded me of how much of a good time we had in Mexico, because I've got like Swerve Strickland, who was a part of one of the gigantic, was he in the 14 or the 10 man? I can't keep track of it.
He's in the 10 man.
The 10 man, right. We got Nick Wayne, who wrestled in ROH against Teton. I got to do that match. Very exciting. We had Hologram, who was in an awesome 4-way. Oh man, Upper Deck really just hooking us up with all these. And then probably my favorite moment of Mexico is Hangman Adam Page opening the show with a promo completely in Spanish, which is great for someone who doesn't speak Spanish.
Yeah, no, honestly, he had been kind of talking about that one for some time, and I was really looking forward to him doing that and to get to open the show and do that in Spanish the way he did. And the way it captured that audience, it was great. I think the entire Grand Slam Mexico experience is going to be one that's remembered in AEW history for a very long time. It was such a success, and for the fans to get to experience that the way they did and get to sing along with Mystico's theme song, it's again, there's nothing like it. I'm so glad we got to do it. We got to see so many sights and see so many old faces and new faces and make new friends. And speaking of new friends, I believe we are joined today by a new friend here in AEW. Who do we got, Aubrey?
Today, we are joined by one of my new friends, our new friends, the finally All Elite, Josh Alexander. Hello, sir. How are you? Welcome. Glad you finally showed up here.
Finally showed up, finally invited. We made it happen.
Right?
Yeah.
Right, we made it happen.
I mean, finally invited. I have to say, this is one of our most requested guests of the last month or so, almost 2 months. I feel like every time we post a new episode of Unrestricted, the comments were always, when are you going to have Josh Alexander? Got to have Josh Alexander. We need Josh Alexander on the show. So like the fact that we finally made this happen, I think is a bigger deal than, especially to the Unrestricted audience, than anybody realizes. Thank you for being here.
Heck yeah. I'd like to hear that. Let's go.
Yeah, you made a lot of people happy today. Speaking of happy, we were talking a little bit before we started this about just Mexico and how you'd been there a couple times before with TNA, but obviously this was very different experience. Like, this is AEW's first time in Mexico, and we're in Arena Mexico, which, you know, is owned by CMLL. So there's a lot of guys who have been in Mexico before, but this is their first time in this building, including yourself. So what was that experience like, being able to perform in Arena Mexico?
It was just completely different for me. Like when I did AAA shows for TNA, they had a working agreement and stuff, and like I have fond memories of that. Like I got to work Vikingo in front of that crowd, and I remember the pin happened at the end of the match, and I was like, damn, that was a good match. And then all of a sudden, like, something beams me in the head, and I'm like, what's going on? And like something else hits me, and I'm looking around. All of a sudden, there's all these coins and bills hitting the ring, because I guess they really enjoyed the match, so they wanted to show us like love. So they're throwing, like, literally, I'm getting hit with coins from all angles and stuff. And I was like, man, this is crazy. And then I got to the back, and like me and Vikingo split up the money, and like I still have that bill that I like in my wallet. I keep it as good luck every time I travel and stuff like that, as like a memory, an omen, or whatever you want to talk about. So I have like great memories of that, but like being in Arena Mexico was something completely different. It was on a completely different level in front of that crowd. It was insane. And it was a little strange too, because me, like, I'm a big bad heel with the Don Callis family, you know, and I'm stepping in the ring. And, I'm facing, you know, a luchador that I know from Mexico, from, being in AEW and Atlantis Junior, but in Arena Mexico, man, there's a different vibe on Atlantis Junior. And, I was warned beforehand. I was like, maybe it'll be fine. And it was exactly as advertised by them. So, the local Mexican crowd really kind of heals on him, for, whatever reason. They want him to prove himself a little bit more to like kind of get over his baby face. So it was really cool for me, and it was a cool experience. And then like looking into the crowd and seeing like Bryan Danielson and Chris Hero sitting beside each other, losing their minds. And like a funny story is like we're on the bus afterwards heading back, and Bryan was on my bus, and Bryan was like, yeah, man, they kept like booing Atlantis Jr. And I'm like, no, Josh Alexander sucks. Josh Alexander sucks. and he's like, I'm screaming it, trying to get people to catch on. And it just didn't catch on. And I was like, I get it, but like, man, the 16-year-old wrestling fan in me, you're breaking his heart right now. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was a cool vibe, man. I really enjoyed myself. Hopefully we get to go back.
Oh, I really hope so. Like, it's one of those, like, this better be an annual thing. And if not, can we just go there like twice, 3 times a year? Like, oh man,
Yeah.
Mexico is great.
They definitely want it. So,
Well, and talk a little bit about the, talking about Grand Slam specifically. You, of course, had the 14-man tag match, and, the chaos of trios matches is already quite a bit. And then when you get into 8-man territory, you start, it gets even more chaotic and thinking about what's going on and having to stay in communication with everybody. 14-man. Talk a little bit about kind of the chaotic nature of that moment and having that many people around you. And not just that, but at the same time, of course, yeah, you have that unpredictable element of the crowd and the way they were reacting to Atlantis. Like, how was all of that in that moment?
Well, I mean, it's well documented. I've probably said it on many podcasts over my career, and I've said it, to friends in the back in locker rooms. Anything over 6 people, I'm like, I detest it. It's just like such a chore. You know what I mean?
It's the worst. I did that. Yes.
Like if it's a 6-man scramble, I'm like, okay, that's my limit. If it's a 6-man tag, okay, we're at a good limit here. We can piece this together and everything. But once you get anything above that, it's like there's so many personalities like trying to get their stuff in and trying to fit stuff in. And then when you're out there, like it's so much more difficult that if something goes wrong or if somebody, doesn't know where we're supposed to go or something, that you can't just kind of grab the reins and like interject and fix everything because, it's just kind of happening. And there's so many different moving parts and people involved. But like for all things considered, 14-man tag, man, I think it went really well.
Yeah.
There was some pretty scary bumps that happened in the match. But like, we went out there in front of that crowd, and when, you're going into Arena Mexico, like the debut show for Dynamite live from Mexico, the stakes are going to be raised and you're going to try to push the envelope here or there. So, things are going to happen. You're going to take a little bit more risks. And, luckily we all came out okay from those crazy bumps and stuff like that. But just like the adrenaline rush you have, like it kind of supersedes everything that was going on in the match at the time. Like there was moments in that match where I'm sitting there going, I don't know if we're going to hit our commercial break. And I look over at Dax, and Dax is like, oh, I don't know. And then, like, he starts. But, like, it's also that you don't have everybody that speaks English in the match. Like, how are we going to communicate this in Spanish to somebody and try to change? You can't. You just have to ride it out. Like, you're riding a wave at that point from the start to the finish, and you just got to hope it all comes together, and it did. So.
I always love, and by love I mean hate, the planning process of anything with 6+ people, because it's like, hey, can you tell me about this match? And they're like, I know only my stuff. And it's like 3 moves. It's like, okay, cool. Let's try to get this entire group together to talk about this match at least once beforehand.
Yeah,
it is the definition of herding cats. It is wild. So the fact that you guys can pull that off and make it look as good as it does, I'm like, man, these guys are literally like the best. It's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm insane. So like I want to know everything that's happening too. Like I don't just remember what I have to do. I need to know everything that's happening in order like that anybody else knows, just so I can see it all happening and make sure it's happening properly. And if it doesn't, then I have to be like, okay, how are we going to pivot on this? How are we going to fix this? Blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So,
well, that was the thing that was going through my head was, I have having been in AEW for the last 2.5 years, I have watched many a battle royal put together, right? And just thinking about the fact that our battle royals average anywhere between 12 15 to 20 people, right? And like thinking about 14 men in a tag match, that's battle royal territory. And again, just the idea of so many elements having to play out the way they did. Hats off to everybody involved, because I think it came off on TV flawlessly. And so, again,
yes,
just a great moment.
High degree of difficulty, but like many things, that I've experienced in my 2+ months in AEW, when there is a high degree of difficulty, it seems like there's so much talent in the locker room that just rises to the occasion. It always turns out okay. So,
hell yeah. All right.
Well,
I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to cut you off, Will. Sorry.
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about this debut, because I know that you've only been here for a little bit. Yeah, I read your mind, dude. I want to talk about the debut, because this bracket for the Owen Hart tournament comes out and it says wild card. And I'm like, okay, I'm chronically offline. I try to stay offline to I don't want to hear rumors. I want to be surprised by it. But this one made it through my sphere of just blocking things. And I'm like, if it's not Josh Alexander, I'm going to be really, really mad. So when did you find out you were the wild card and that you were going to be facing Hangman Adam Page in Boston?
So I had the same thing, because I knew my visa came in. It only came in probably 6 days prior to that show. And I've been waiting for it for probably over a month at that point, because this stuff takes time, the government and whatever else. But I had been asked, hey, can you travel to Boston? I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, let's go. You know what I mean? And I got to Boston. I flew my wife in because, she's my good luck charm. I wanted her to be there for my debut. I've shared everything with her over the past 10 years. And I didn't know until I got to the building, and, I was snuck into a room and hidden in the corner. And, a producer showed up and told me what I was doing, because I had reached out to some people that I knew and that I thought might be in the know, and been like, hey, do you know what I'm doing? And they're like, whether they knew or not, they weren't telling me. They were just you know what I mean? This is sworn to secrecy. And I'm kind of happy it is done that way, because, I can assume that it's going to be me, and I can prepare. I can, if I hadn't already been watching Adam Page religiously, like I had been, I would have just brushed up on more Adam Page stuff. But, I like that the internet doesn't know about things before they happen. I like that these things don't leak, because it makes it that much more special. And, it just helps, because all wrestlers have that thing. Before your music hits, you're like, man, I hope they pop for me. They may not know me and all this stuff. And my music hit that day and Boston erupted. So, it made it all that much more sweeter when it happened. So,
well, and this felt like a long time coming for AEW fans in particular. I mean, I have been wanting to ask you for years. This wasn't the first time your name had been dropped on AEW television. Mm-hmm. And thinking about the fact that that happened, 3 years ago, it felt like there was a contingency of fans who were ready to see you in an AEW ring. I guess two-part question is, one, how did you feel about that in the moment? And two, coming back to it now, did you feel like this was kind of a full circle moment for you?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll start off at the very beginning, before this company even started, and I heard there was rumblings of it. I hadn't even been. I had done a couple explosion matches for TNA at the time, but they had never even mentioned being interested in me. And I had messaged some people that I knew that might be in the know, and I've been like, is there maybe a spot for, they confirmed that this might be a thing that's happening, and I was like, might there be a spot for this young Canadian independent wrestler, and they went, not right now. And I went, cool, because I was just an independent wrestler from Canada, who had broken his neck 2 years prior. So there was some uncertainty about me. So, I went to TNA and all that stuff. And then when Ethan Page, my former partner in the North, left TNA and came to AEW, I believe the assumption was that when my deal was up, I would join him and we would be running the North through AEW. And, that never transpired, because everything that happened for me in TNA, I felt, for my career, it was better for me to stay and establish myself as, a top talent and do main events and get that, experience and exposure on television. And I think it all paid off and happened exactly how it should. So that when that deal came up and, AEW was number one on my, choices of where I was going to go after TNA. As much as, I might have entertained everything and whatever else just to see what was out there, just for my own, like, kind of to just like be like, hey, are these people interested in me for real? Like, is this a real thing? Like, I just wanted to know. And then when I got like the yes, I was like, cool, but I'm going over here. Like, this is what I want to do. This is what I wanted to be for a long time. Just for the self-satisfaction of it. Just coming here and then finally getting, when I got that pop on that entrance, like I was so nervous. And it's just because I'm sure you guys have heard it on this podcast 1,000 times and every other wrestling podcast. Wrestlers are so insecure at the end of the day.
Oh my God.
Especially as baby faces, because you having people like you and want to see you is way more difficult than walking out there and, being like, hey, the Boston Celtics are terrible guys. And I'm wearing a Lakers jersey on my debut. Like, everybody's going to boo me then or something. But it was just like, you summed it up. This is a full circle moment of like, I've wanted to be here since before this company's inception. And now that I'm here, it's just off to the races, and it's just building blocks, starting from square one, and we're going to see where it goes.
Hell yeah. Okay, we got more to talk about on this and more coming up on AEW Unrestricted. But first, a quick break, so stay tuned. AEW Unrestricted, we've got Aubrey, we've got Will, and we are talking to Josh Alexander, one of our newer signees at All Elite Wrestling, recently joined the Don Callis family, recently wrestled in Arena Mexico the first time, also Canadian, which I'm very excited about. I had no idea that you were like still in Canada, because when I think the first time like we ended up running into each other in an airport, it was in Detroit, and I just assumed you had a connection. You're like, oh no, this is the airport I fly out of. And it's like, oh crap. Yeah, this is great. And you just meet all these friends from all over, which is so fun. I wanted to kind of follow up a little bit on the last note, because you had said AEW had always been like your number one company. And I remember the first time we shared an Uber together, you had mentioned like the first time Tony Khan talked to you. And what was your first experience with Tony Khan like?
The first time he talked to me at TNA, or the first time he talked to me at AEW?
TNA.
Okay, so
we'll tell both stories.
Yes.
I mean, they're very similar, but one, he wasn't my boss, So he showed up with I believe it was when Kenny was showing up, when he was world champion, TNA world champion, obviously. And I think it was right before I was wrestling my like 60+ minute Ironman match against TJP in front of no crowd. So, and we had to go on last that day because nobody was going to wait around to watch us wrestle for 70 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like 10 o'clock at night. I'm just trying to get myself hyped up to go do this insane match in front of no crowd where you get no adrenaline. You know what I mean? And somebody's tapping me on the shoulder, and I was just like, okay, just what, you know what I mean? And then all of a sudden, like the tap gets harder, and I'm like, I turn around, I'm like, what's up? And it's just Tony. And he's like right in front of me. And he goes, Josh Alexander, man, it's so nice to meet you. Oh my God, I'm a big fan. Like, I loved it when you did this, this, and this, and this. And he's mentioning stuff that like, there's no way anybody should remember this stuff. Like, I don't remember half this stuff, but he's like such an encyclopedia of wrestling. And I'm like, and I'm just kind of in shock. And he's like, you okay, man? You okay? I'm just like, yeah, man, it's just like you're a billionaire that owns a wrestling company. I just didn't expect this whatsoever. You know what I mean? And he's like, no, man, it's all good. It's all good. And he like tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, good luck out there. And he just like walks past me, and like Jerry Lynn was behind him because he was with him that day. And Jerry looks at me and goes, you good, man? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. And he just like walked off. And then I went out there and had that insane match. And, you know, that was the day, like that was the match that I think that really like springboarded my personal career to like being recognized as somebody that could, you know, be a top guy in a company at like TNA and stuff like that. So it was just a crazy time to meet him that I'll never forget, as many things as I do forget that happened in my career. But yeah. And then obviously right before I went out, he just kind of gave me like the thumbs up, kill it out there, let's fucking go. And I was like, cool. I went out.
All of this sounds exactly as I would expect it to go.
Yeah, and it's even funnier when I come back, because I came back and it went really well and all this stuff, and they reacted for me. And he was really hyped up. So yeah, fucking you sick patch, man. You fucking did good, blah, blah, all this stuff. I'm like, thank you.
He gets up, he hugs you. It's real exciting.
And I'm like, thank you, man. You know, I really appreciate you bringing me in. He's like, yeah, fucking let's keep going, blah, blah, blah. And like, I kind of walked off, and I've known RJ for 20 years, and RJ's right there. And RJ goes, how did that go? And I was just like, I'm just worried. And he goes, why? I'm just like, because I don't emote excitement in my face. Like, I'm excited, but I don't do it like that. And he goes, yeah. I don't think he'll take offense to it. I'm like, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like, I was just so worried that he was like, Josh isn't excited to be here at all, because like, I don't do that with my kids do something amazing. I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome, little guy, like blah, blah. But like, I can't do it for wrestling. Like, it's completely different.
No, that's great. I mean, look, that I knowing Tony, as long as what you're doing out there, and as long as what you've put out there is the best effort for the product that we're creating, and that's exactly what you did. You sold it perfectly.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Don Callis family, because one of the things you talked about was the difficulty of having to go out there as a babyface. But luckily, you didn't have to do it for very long, because by the end of the night, you were a solidified heel in one of the biggest heel factions in all of AEW and the history of AEW. So let's talk about what it's been like getting to align with Don Callis. This isn't the first time you've worked with Don Callis, but now you're getting to be in a faction with Don Callis in AEW. How did that all come together? And did you find out that day, or had you kind of gotten some rumblings that was going to be the case?
I found out that day. Like, I found out what the match I was having, and then shortly thereafter, Don kind of came into the room. It's just like, so after the match, I'm gonna whisper in your ear, you're gonna jump him, you're gonna be in the family. And I was like, cool, because I mean, I've said it on other podcasts. Like, I had kind of, during that visa process when there was so much uncertainty with what I might do, I had mentioned to, Scott Demore, who's a neighbor of mine here in Windsor, Ontario, when we got together, that like, I was like, I kind of hope I get put with Don, because like, I'd worked with Don in the past, like you said, in TNA. And I think Don's a very smart man for, telling wrestling stories and getting heat and, doing business the right way to draw money.
He's brilliant.
I've learned I only got to work with him like a couple times from a production standpoint in TNA, but he was always somebody that was in the writer's room that was kind of going to bat for me, because when the North was a thing and there needed to be a singles match with one of us, I would usually be the one that was depended on to have the good match with like the Marufuji or the Vikingo or any of these people that was coming in to highlight that they could get a win on, because I was a tag team guy. So I always knew that Don, if nothing else, thought a lot of my in-ring wrestling. So, you know what I mean? And I wanted to learn more from like the promo side, the business side from him. So getting put with him has been, a great thing for me. I'm very happy to be the Don Callis family. It's a stacked team. You mean between Kyle Fletcher, Kanosa Takesha, now we have Okada, and like the family's growing week by week, but
every week.
yeah, it's just a stacked group, and it's cool just to be kind of highlighted in that faction to where, I'm seen a lot on TV right out the get-go. So
I want to talk a little bit about, because you mentioned Scott Demore there, and I know you guys have a pretty great friendship. I know he's working with Maple Leaf Pro Wrestling, which you are a champion at. What is your relationship with Scott like? And did you have a relationship prior to TNA, or did that just kind of blossom at TNA?
So if you were to ask like social media, I have been a Scott Demore guy forever. And I owe everything that's ever happened in my career to just being friends with him and the nepotism involved in it. But it couldn't be like further from the truth. Like, I remember Gail 3 years ago, who's been friends with Scott for, since 2005 or something. She was like, oh, you're a Scott Demore guy. And I was like, what does that mean? And she was like, hey, you've known him forever. You've always been one of his guys. He trained you. I was like, no, he never trained me. No, he never booked me on any of his independent shows that he's ever had until after I was already in TNA for years. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't talk to me for the first 2 years I was in TNA, basically. You know what I mean? Like, it was like he talked to me, but it was never like we had a relationship or a friendship. Mm-hmm. It wasn't really until after
it's like colleagues.
Yeah. After that Iron Man match, that's why I call it kind of my springboard to success. That's where, like, I think in his eyes, like, my abilities and what I could do in that company changed, and that's where he kind of started opening up and trusting me a little bit more, and that's where the relationship grew to the point now where he's one of my best friends in wrestling, because I can go to him with any questions I have and stuff like that. And I mean, I chalk it up always to being reliable and dependable. he knows that I'm always going to go out there and I'm going to do whatever I'm told. I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and I'm always going to give more than 100%, maybe at the expense of my body. It's just the way I'm wired. And, I'll kill myself to try to make sure everything goes as good as possible. And it's something that's paid off for me. And, now going in MLP, I'm like, that's why I'm Canadian champion. I'm somebody that can be depended on to have these good matches when they're needed in a moment. And I'm very, very grateful to have that trust.
Well, and when you really think about kind of the launch of Maple Leaf in the last year and how everything had kind of come together, and you think about the brand that Scott has been trying to build with this, I don't think, and this isn't just me speaking to blow smoke toward my guest, I genuinely think when you think about what Maple Leaf Pro represents and what it's supposed to be and who Scott D'Amore is and the product he's trying to put forward, I don't think there's a better face for it than Josh Alexander. I think that when you think about who you are as a performer, what you bring to the table in the ring, and then, we'll talk about it in a little bit because of how it all came together, but you have such a unique presence and look to professional wrestling that it comes together in such a badass way that for a company like Maple Leaf to launch the way it has, you as champion makes the most amount of sense.
Yeah, I kind of pigeonholed him into booking me in this way. Because, it was after I came back from my neck surgery, I had not been banned, but I've been told if I travel to America without a visa for wrestling, I would be banned. So I just kind of relented myself to being an independent wrestler in Canada. And I was like, oh man, if I do this just on weekends, it makes me happy, that's fine. But it didn't mean I stopped trying. And what I kept doing was trying to get more eyes on Canadian independent wrestling as much as I could and grow it. And because I love Canadian wrestling, like if I didn't discover the independence and the wrestling community here in Canada when I was 18 years old, like I would be dead in jail or something else, because like I had nothing going for me. Wrestling is what made me become a responsible adult so I could fund and support my wrestling habit that I had. You know what I mean? Like
that is not the phrase I expected to ever hear about like being an adult and wrestling, because it's oftentimes the exact opposite. So it worked out for you.
No, I was like homeless, living in my car for a month, waiting for my room to be done at my grandma's house so that I could move into my grandma's house, just so I could squat there for a bit. And I had to be like, man, I need to get a job. I need to get like become responsible so that I can continue to do this wrestling thing. And it's what made me grow up. You know what I mean?
Hell yeah. So. I like it. I like that a lot. Oh man. Okay. Oh, more coming up, but we have to take a quick break. So stay tuned here for AEW Unrestricted.
AEW Unrestricted. It's Will Washington. It's Aubrey Edwards and our guest, the walking weapon, Josh Alexander. Josh, we talk a lot about world traveled performers. And I don't think we can use that phrase with anybody more than we can use it for you. You have traveled the world and performed all across the world. And not just that, but you have performed with so many of the AEW roster. When you think about it, when you walked in, did you kind of feel that moment that a lot of guys do of like, this is almost a reunion in a lot of ways? Because, you see a speedball Mike Bailey, right? Like somebody that you were just around literally a few months prior. But then you've also gotten to work Will Ospreay recently. And so how did it feel walking into that locker room and embracing some of the familiar faces?
Oh, it was great. Like you name those names right off the top. You can name somebody like Daniel Garcia. He started wrestling in Buffalo. So this guy's having his first matches. Yeah, there you go. He's having his first matches mainly in Ontario because it's the closest drive and we have such like a high volume of shows. I got to see him come up in wrestling from the very start. I had some of his first matches. I wrestled him, a dozen times through his first 150 matches. You know what I mean? Like a guy like that. Like there's so many people in that locker room that I've crossed paths with over my 20 years of traveling around. Like I said this to somebody recently. We were having a chat. Like I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for Matt and Nick Jackson. Mm-hmm. And I think it was because Big LG had the clip on his podcast just saying you need to put these guys over more because they're great guys and people owe them a lot. But like seriously, Me and Ethan Page flew to LA. It was our first flight ever as a tag team to wrestle on like a little independent show for like $30, but they bought our flight and they put us in a tag match against the Young Bucks.
Oh my God.
And from that, we flew home. 2 months later, they called us on the phone and was like, do you guys want to wrestle in PWG? Just because like we made that connection of having that chemistry with them in that good match. And we're like, do we want to? Yes, of course we want.
It's a rhetorical question.
This is 2015. You know what I mean? And then we show up at PWG and our first match is a tag match against the Young Bucks. We're like, when we went out to the ring, their music hit. It was the first time in my life Ethan Page turned to me and was talking to me right beside me, and I just went, I can't hear you, because the crowd was going so like the pop was that insane. You know what I mean? It was like, without that, them just like being like that networking thing where they get us that booking, like I don't think my name would have been seen enough to, you know, get the shots at the Ring of Honor and then the TNAs and stuff like that to elevate my name. So it's really weird how things happen, but everything happens for a reason. It's really cool how it all works out at the end.
Right. So you mentioned 2015. I want to talk about the brief retirement and the neck injury, because this is obviously a big deal. Talk about the decision and why you felt that was like your only choice at that point and why you ultimately came back.
Well, I first broke my neck in July of 2014. I had surgery in September, and I came back in October because at the time Ring of Honor was talking about signing what was then the Monster Mafia. And I was really scared that, you know, if I had to take 9 months off, blah, 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 like Ethan would lose his opportunity and stuff. So like, I'm like, I'll work around it. You know what I mean? I'm not going to take any head bumps.
So like a true wrestler.
Which turned out to be pretty, you know, stupid, because I re-broke it in March of the next year, 2015. But my first son, Lucas, had been born in December of 2014 at that time. So I'm under a great deal of stress. And the second time I broke it, the doctors were just like, we're going to have to fuse 2 levels. There's no way you're going to be able to wrestle again, yada, yada, yada. And I was just, by then I was done. Like I had just recovered from one, you know, atrophied arm from my first neck break to now having my second arm now atrophied on the other side. And I was just like exhausted. And I was just like, I've been chasing this dream now for like, I don't know, 12 years or whatever it was. And I'm just like, it's not going to happen for me. It's fine. I'm going to go be a dad and support my family. And I woke up from surgery and he was just like, oh, we didn't have to fuse 2 levels. And I was like, why? And he's like, oh, you know, it wasn't as bad when we opened it up. It was just like, there was bones in your spinal column, so we removed it. You should be fine. Just, you know, do 9 months of rehab. And I'm just sitting there like, I just retired.
Ooh, I got chill. Like that just made me shudder so hard. My God.
Yeah. And it's weird though, because like I didn't say I'm going back to wrestling. I was just like, I'm just not going to tell anybody I'm going to stay retired, because I didn't want to be that wrestler that like fake retires to make money, or like I didn't want the fans to think I took advantage of them, because I had a retirement show with a lot of support and stuff like that, and it meant a great deal to me. But you know, 6 months later I was out drinking with my friends and I mentioned it to Ethan Page, and he was like, you're coming back, what are you talking about? He's just like, you're miserable, you have to come back. And it was just like,
you're miserable or you're sleep deprived, because like, let's remember there was the baby there.
Yeah, but I was really unhappy without wrestling. So I was like, sure, man, if you think the fans aren't going to like, you know, shit all over it, I'll come back. And I came back and it all went really good, man. And I've never had a problem with my neck since, you know, knocking on the wood behind me. But yeah, it's just been something I've had to deal with ever since. It's been 10 years since I, you know, had my neck surgery, and, you know, things have been working out pretty good so far. So I'm just going to ride this wave as long as I can.
Hell yeah.
Well, one of the things we talked about before was, you know, I mentioned how you have one of the most unique looks in professional wrestling. And a big part of that is wrestling in headgear, which ultimately ended up adding such an intense element to your presence. But there's actually a story to the headgear itself that a lot of AEW fans may not know. Can you share that with our audience?
Yeah. The short story of it is I wrestled on a Thursday night in Toronto. I took a head scissors from M-Dog Matt Cross, and he had like a knee brace on, and it scraped my ear and it cauliflowered. and I had a booking the next day for what was the JT Lightning Invitational Tournament for AEW in Cleveland. And I went and I drained my ear that night myself because I'm no stranger to cauliflower ear.
Yeah.
And I went and did the tournament. And that night, I remember I was wrestling ACH in the opener. And I was supposed to go to the finals, if not win this tournament, which, you know, on the independents is kind of a big deal. So I was pretty hyped for it. And I was like, just whatever you do, just please try to stay away from this ear. It's really sensitive. And there was just one point in the match where he goes to give me that enziguri over the rope. And when he did, it just like toe kicked me right in the ear. And my ear just blew up bigger than this headphone. And I remember Dolph Ziggler was in the audience that night, Nick Nemeth, because he used to come to those shows because he lived in Cleveland just to watch. And I sold over the corner and I like touched my ear and my whole hand was around it like this. And I was like, and I look over it and I see Nick in the back of the audience. He goes,
"Oh no."
Like that. And I was just like, oh, I'm messed up. I don't know what's going on. And yeah, I went to the hospital in Cleveland. They drained it and lanced it and whatever else. And I went back and I did like some storyline in the second round where they laid me out and that moved on to whatever. But when I went back home, it had already blown up again. So whatever the hospital did for $1,700 didn't fix it. And I went to a Canadian hospital and waited 12 hours to be seen. And once I got seen, they ended up having to surgically like cut it all open and like pin it to the side of my head. And they were like, don't touch it or irritate it for 3 to 5 months. And I was like, I remember I was like, I have a booking in 2 weeks in Ottawa, guys. And they were like, well, don't touch it. And I was like, okay. So I ordered headgear and put it on for the first time. The first time I ever wore it was at C4. And the match was against Speedball Mike Bailey and somebody else in a 3-way. And I remember I felt like such a goof wearing it, walking out. Like I walked out and like fans are barking like I'm Rick Steiner. I'm getting like Princess Leia chants, nice headphones, jackass. Like I'm hearing everything. And I'm just like, I'm such a goof, but whatever. And then the match was awesome. You know, it's Mike Bailey, so it's hard not to. And I came to the back and I was just like, damn, that match went well. And I was just like, I need to get rid of this headgear. And Ethan Page walked up to me and goes, you're never taking off the headgear. And I'm like, in my head, I just said, I need to get rid of this. And he goes, you're never taking it off. I go, why? He's like, you look like such a badass and it's so unique. It's got to stay. And I was like, all right. And it's never left since. So
Yeah, it's one of those things. It's like, it's the most wrestling thing, but no one else did it. It's so smart and brilliant.
People have tried. Like Rick did it. And then there was a bunch of people in NXT that kind of tried. And I believe it was like shortly after I put it on in 2012. There was a couple wrestlers in like NXT or FCW that had tried to do it and they wore it for 2 weeks and they were like, nah, I can't do this. And I was like, whoof, phew, still my thing. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's a very polarizing thing. Like even to this day, like, you know, with social media and stuff like that, like my AEW debut, everybody's like bigging you up online and stuff like that. And it's nice to read these things and you got, who's this jackass in headphones or something like that. You know what I mean? And like, he looks so dumb. And you're like, oh man, you can't please everybody, whatever.
I think it's like a different silhouette, which is ultimately in wrestling, like what you're looking for. You're trying to figure out a way to like stand out visually so that when someone's looking at you going, what makes this guy different? And then you draw them in with your wrestling and it's like, oh shit, this guy's actually really friggin' great. So forget about the headphones, the headgear, whatever you want to call it. Like it's just friggin' badass. I think
it's been 13 years. I got the thickest skin in the world for this headgear.
Right.
Now it ain't bothering me. For what I say at like seminars or with my students at the Can-Am Wrestling Dojo, it's like wrestlers need an identifier. So if you go to a show and, you know, only half the audience is going to remember your name because they're hardcore fans. Everybody else, when they leave the show, they'll be like, oh man, I like the guy with face paint that did like the clown thing. Oh, I like that guy with the headphones on. You know, at least it's something for somebody to remember you by.
Yes.
Yeah.
The show. So.
Well, the last question I want to leave you with then is I want to bring it back to where we started this segment, where I talked about some of the familiar faces you saw in the locker room when you first got to AEW. But now I want to ask you about some of the unfamiliar faces, some of the people you've never gotten to step in a ring with. And AEW is where the best wrestle. And we do have such an incredible roster. Who are some of the people that you're looking to tie it up with in the time that you're with AEW?
Okay, so I've answered this question a few times since I've come in, but those 4 names will not change. I'd never wrestled Adam Page or Brody King in singles matches before I came to AEW. That's already happened. That's been awesome. Very happy about that. But Chris Jericho, Edge, and Kenny Omega for the Canadian history of Canadian wrestlers. Dude. I've never been in the ring with any of them. That's something I want to have happen really badly. And Swerve Strickland. Those were the 4 that I've named every single time because I've never wrestled any of them. And if you're talking about like just body of work of something somebody's done in the past 2 to 3 years to just elevate themselves from an in-ring perspective, storytelling perspective, a character perspective, I think Swerve's top of the list from what I've seen just watching AEW. So that's always been on the list. But then you have, the Darby Allins. I've never had a match with Darby. It'd be crazy.
That just sounds awesome to me. Just thinking about,
dude.
Especially just thinking about Darby as with his amateur background and everything. Like, my God, that sounds like that would be amazing.
Hell yeah.
Hey, Will, a guy in creative, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Maybe make this happen.
But guys, the list keeps growing. Kota Ibushi just showed up on Saturday. You know what I'm saying? And like, I take exception to him kicking me in the head. So if we want to follow that up with a singles match, I'd be more than happy to oblige everybody. So
boom, there we go. Oh my God, this conversation's been so great. I feel like we could go on for like 3, 4, 5 more hours because your body of work is so great. It speaks to who you are as a person, the excellent wrestler that you are. I'm so happy you're at AEW and that you finally decided to join us. We're the best wrestler. Finally decided.
Yeah, it was all on me, guys. I was just, biding my
100%
time.
on you. 100%. Just making us all wait. I appreciate that. But yeah, thank you, Josh Alexander. You can follow him on X and Instagram at walking_weapon. AEW Unrestricted is sponsored in part by Upper Deck. You can remember, you can collect your favorite wrestlers in the 2025 Upper Deck AEW and start your trading card collection today. You can unwrap autograph memorabilia, premium tech inserts. Visit upperdeck.com to learn more. You can listen to and follow this podcast, AEW Unrestricted, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the fun, cool podcast apps. You can check out video episodes on our YouTube channel, AEW Unrestricted. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you're not an AEW insider, you can get early access to ticket pre-sales, special merchandise offers, and more straight to your inbox. You can just sign up for AEW Insider Newsletter today at AEWTIX.com. Don't forget, AEW Dynamite on TBS Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. and streaming on Max. AEW Collision live every Saturday at TNT and streaming on Max. ROH streams every Thursday on Honor Club. I'm Aubrey Edwards. That's Will Washington. Thank you so much for listening to AEW Unrestricted. Peace out. Bye.